Electric vehicles make up just a fraction of the cars on Australia's roads. In fact, the latest data shows just 4% of new car sales are EVs. Advocates say demand is strong, but that it's difficult to convince car makers to ship new models here. And as Angus Randall explains, some are worried the transition to electric vehicles isn't happening fast enough to meet Australia's emissions reduction pledge.
When Lisi from Melbourne sold her old car for scrap, she hadn't even considered an electric vehicle as an option.
And obviously I was like, no, that's ridiculous. Why would I get an EV? Like, I'm not. And she's like, you work in tech.
But now she hopes to never visit a petrol station again.
And I'm actually in the process of upgrading to a car with longer range because I'm looking at driving my car up to Brisbane for Christmas this year. And I really want to do it in an EV.
A report released today from the Electric Vehicle Council shows sales of EVs are on the increase, but it's still just a tiny percentage of all new car sales. Dr Jake Whitehead is the head of policy at the Electric Vehicle Council.
So we're now approaching 3.4% of all new vehicles sold so far this year are electric vehicles. That's a 65% increase compared to 2021. But really, if we look across the country, we're not seeing the pace and rate of adoption of electric vehicles that's required for us to hit our emission reduction targets. And the key barrier to this continues to be a lack of supply.
He says car companies are prioritising other markets because most other countries have fuel efficiency standards. These standards mean car companies have to bring in a minimum number of green vehicles or face a penalty. But in Australia, there's no penalty for importing fossil fuel cars. So EV advocates say we end up with the cars that couldn't be sold elsewhere. Dr Whitehead says electric vehicles could start to flood in by 2024 if the government brings in the right standards.
I think as soon as we've settled on a policy and that's announced, we will soon after start to see more models come into the market. And as long as those targets that are within the fuel efficiency standard are ambitious enough, we can catch up to other markets like the UK.
The government is seeking submissions for its National Electric Vehicle Strategy, which is likely to result in a fuel efficiency standard. It's part of the government's broader pledge to reduce emissions by 42% by 2030. Ainsley Simpson is the CEO of the Infrastructure Sustainability Council. She says a greener transport sector could make a big difference on those emissions targets.
Now, if you have a look at what the transport sector in itself contributes to our emissions, it's about 18.3% in 2020. And that just shows that from a transport perspective, there is a really enormous opportunity for us.
The government's National Electric Vehicle Strategy consultation paper is accepting submissions until the end of the month.